Paris, the city of romance, the city of light, the city of 6 million skeletons piled neatly beneath your feet. Yes, while tourists snap selfies at the Eiffel Tower, directly below them lies one of the largest ossuaries in the world, a sprawling labyrinth of skulls and bones stacked into macabre walls. Paris is built on love, croissants, and an unfathomable quantity of dead Parisians. Welcome to the Waxenvein ledger, where history isn't always glorious. Sometimes it's claustrophobic, candlelit, and whispering back at you from the dark. Today we descend into the catacombs of Paris, a story of a city drowning in death, a bizarre solution carved underground, and a legacy that turned practical engineering into one of the creepiest monuments on Earth. And before we get lost in the tunnels, do me a favor, like and subscribe. It keeps this channel alive and ensures the ledger's doors keep opening for you. Picture Paris in the mid-1700s. It's not the postcard-perfect city we imagine today. Instead, it reeked. Cemeteries were overflowing, bodies piled high after centuries of burials. The Cemetery of the Innocents, the largest in the city, had been in use for nearly 600 years. Grave pits were dug, filled to the brim, covered over, and dug again. By the 18th century, you could dig into the soil and find layers of Parisians stacked like lasagna. The stench was unbearable. Local residents reported that meat in nearby butcher shops spoiled within hours. Even bread baked near the cemetery carried the taste of death. And when walls gave way, rotting corpses literally spilled into neighboring basements. Just think what it would be like to sit down to eat dinner only for a half-decayed skeleton to tumble through your cellar wall. And if that wasn't enough, the city itself began collapsing into the earth. Paris was built on limestone quarries, hollowed out beneath the streets. Sinkholes swallowed houses whole. It was as if the city was falling into its own grave. Something had to be done. The answer was neither elegant nor romantic. It was grim. Take a city already sinking into its own skeleton and fill the void with even more skeletons. The solution was equal parts practical and horrifying. Move the dead underground. In 1786, city officials ordered that the overflowing cemeteries be cleared and the bones transferred into abandoned quarries beneath Paris. But how do you discreetly relocate millions of corpses? At night, under black drapes. Starting in 1787, covered wagons rolled through the streets after dark, hauling bones by the cartload. The processions were led by priests, chanting prayers as torchlight flickered off the cargo. Think about what it would be like to be awake at midnight, hearing the creak of wagon wheels, and coming to the grim understanding that those wagons are filled with your ancestors. And these weren't tidy skeletons, neatly boxed up for relocation. Cemeteries were dug open, mass graves exhumed, centuries of remains disturbed. Whole skeletons were rare. Most bodies had decomposed into piles of bones, tangled together. Gravediggers shoveled them into carts, sometimes still scraping against fragments of coffin wood or half-rotted cloth. The air reeked of lime, rot, and dust. What began in cemeteries of the innocents spread across the city, graveyard after graveyard emptied like reservoirs drained. Over the years, bones were brought down by the millions. Femurs, skulls, ribs, all carried into the yawning quarries and deposited into heaps. A river of bones flowed beneath Paris, turning caverns into crypts. It was, in every sense, a burial of the city itself. At first, the ossuary was chaos, piles of bones dumped in heaps. The men who labored down there were quarrymen, veterans of stone and shadow. They were already used to navigating pitch-black tunnels, and now they were given the task of bringing in the remains of millions. It was brutal, claustrophobic work. Torches hissed in damp air, casting shadows that made skulls seem to grin. The walls groaned with the weight of the city above, and every drip of water echoed like a ticking clock. In some passages, the darkness pressed so close that a single misstep could mean tumbling into a pit of bones. Cave-ins were constant threats. The air was heavy with lime dust and the metallic tang of damp stone. Imagine hours spent bent over in the gloom, stacking femurs into lines, skull after skull after skull, until the faces blurred and the workers themselves must have wondered if they'd joined the dead in spirit. And yet, night after night, men stacked skulls into walls and lined bones into corridors. The catacombs were being built by human hands, with human remains. By the early 1800s, the ossuary got a makeover. Louis-Étienne Héricard de Thury, inspector of quarries, decided that if Paris was going to have a city of the dead, it might as well look presentable. Under his direction, bones were rearranged into decorative patterns, arches of skulls, crosses of femurs, pillars of tibias. He even added plaques with inscriptions, poetic reminders of mortality like, "Stop. This is the empire of death." What had begun as a desperate dumping ground had become something stranger, a macabre museum curated out of human remains. The catacombs quickly took on a life, or afterlife, of their own. The tunnels stretched for miles, a labyrinth where even the living could vanish. One famous victim was Philibert Aspairt, a doorkeeper who wandered into the catacombs in 1793. He got lost in the darkness and was never seen alive again. His body was only discovered years later, identified by his keys and clothing. A small grave marker still notes where he was found. His fate is a warning. In the catacombs, even the living could become part of the collection. And that's just the beginning. Over the centuries, the catacombs became a stage for secret societies, occultists, and clandestine meetings. Revolutionaries plotted in the shadows. Later, Nazis used them during World War II, only to be opposed by French resistance fighters who also knew the tunnels. Imagine fighting a war in corridors lined with centuries of skulls staring back at you. Rumors swirl of rituals in torchlit chambers, whispers of cults communing with the dead. Whether or not those stories are true almost doesn't matter. When you put 6 million corpses together in a single place, the imagination fills the silence. Today, tourists line up to descend the spiral staircase and shuffle through those narrow corridors, snapping selfies beside walls of skulls that once belonged to neighbors, bakers, soldiers, and lovers. Paris above thrums with life, cafes steaming with coffee, couples strolling bridges, music drifting from street corners. But below, the city rests on silence. 6 million voices compressed into architecture, their bones stacked neatly as though the dead had been conscripted into building materials. The catacombs are not simply an ossuary, they are a reminder that civilization is always layered, the light of today balanced precariously on the shadows of yesterday. In Paris, that shadow isn't a metaphor, it's literal, you are walking on it. So when you think of Paris as the city of light, remember that its foundations were first illuminated by torchlight glinting off bone. If you enjoyed this descent into the catacombs, keep the ledger open by liking, commenting, and subscribing. It helps this channel live on, unlike the millions beneath Paris, who most certainly are not going anywhere. Until next time, keep your lanterns lit, and don't wander too far from the path.